Hey Siri, stop. So, welcome back. Hello, everyone. Sorry, this is a weird intro. Sorry if I'm in what appears to be my pajamas. I'm trying to record as many recording time into wherever I can these days. I've come up with this idea. I've come up with a little bit of a call this a bit of a beta test, if you will. I actually recorded and wrote this album review back in January when the album came out, but I've reviewed the latest Bring Me the Horizon album called AMO. I'm completely aware that it's like 6 months later, but I haven't had the time to get around to editing it because of Who the Fuck, which has been great fun to do. And going into, after editing, I want to know what I'm going to kind of tackle next. So there are people that review albums, there are people that review films, there are people that review books, there are people that review restaurants. Music is what I know and what I think I'm good at. The people that review music already on YouTube are very good at what they do. I just think that the platform could make it better. What I like to do in my Music Club episodes is put snippets of music. Now that's great, but YouTube's copyright claiming system is getting smarter, copyright laws aren't changing. In fact, in the EU now they've just passed a bill to make it even harder. You know, I'm a big advocate for fair use, and I think that the music industry in particular is greedy when it comes to samples and using other people's work. And I think that there's some big laws that need to change in that realm. I thought it was really interesting seeing that the Verve got the rights back to Bittersweet Symphony after like 20 years. That if you read into that story, it's absolutely disgusting why the Rolling Stones had the rights in the first place. So I think that copyright is really interesting, and I want to avoid copyright claims on my videos. And also there's a part of this where if I'm going to be playing people's music, surely they should get the view. So there is two versions of this video that you're about to watch. Version number one is me talking straight for like 30 minutes about AMO, and we go track for track. So I think there's 13 sections, there's an intro, there's an outro, and 13 tracks, so there's like 14 videos in total. Option number one is you can just watch it straight, fine. Option two is that I've cut it into a playlist where you can listen to me talk about the track, and then the track plays, and then we talk about the next track, and then the next track plays. That happens throughout the whole track. If that's something you like to do, you can click on the banner that's appearing on top of the video right now. I want to know if you do enjoy this review, if you think this is something that could work going forward. I've got some ideas that if you do think this works, I think this will work really effectively for. And I think there needs to be a change. Obviously, I'd really like to start like a podcast or something along those lines, but to do that, I can't use copyrighted material. So this is how I think I'm going to get around this. And also it's a fair way for other people's music to get played and to get viewed and for them to get paid as well, which I also think is important, until there's like a podcast PRS YouTube license, which if they could somehow make, that would be amazing. Anyway, option number one is this video will just carry on playing and go into the next video, and it's like half an hour of me ranting. Or if you want to separate it and go into different videos, then feel free to just click in the link below or the eye at the top, and you can watch it in playlist format. Let me know what works best. If you'd like me to review any other albums, let me know if this works. This is something kind of new to my channel, but it is something that I'd like to do more of. So and there's some great music out there, so if this is something you think is good, then let me know. If there's an album you'd like me to review, let me know. And yeah, Bring Me the Horizon, AMO, 6 months too late. Check the format, let me know what you think. Cheers, bye. Welcome back to another album review. This time I'm going to be looking into the latest instalment from Bring Me the Horizon, the latest album entitled AMO. Going into this record, I had this really different, I don't even know what you call it, opinion, thought, expectation. It was really mixed. From their kind of earlier work and kind of never really delving into that, just kind of seeing them play like Reading and stuff. They were just this mega heavy screamo band. And it's just something that just didn't attract me. I'm sure that there are people out there that really love that, but for me it wasn't anything that was anything special for me. And then about, when was it, like 3-4 years ago, they released That's the Spirit, which was just so different for their sound, and it was really, I don't know if you would say more commercial. Let's go with that. That's fine. I don't want to use that as a negative phrase at all. I think that's fine. More accessible, should we say? And rather than it being this just aggression, blast beat, scream stuff, it was kind of more melodic and structured in a different way, and it sounded really cool. And I ended up really enjoying parts of that album. I never really delved into it and listened to it in the same way that I've done with this album. Yeah, I really enjoyed probably 5 or 6 songs from that record. So I thought we would go through AMO and just go track for track and see how we feel about it. But just looking at some of the featured artists on this record, it was already something that I was intrigued to see, and I've loved the singles that have come out so far. So let's start with track 1. I Apologise If You Feel Something. From the get-go, they'd kind of set the tone that they wanted to change their sound, and that they were bored of just, they've done deathcore or black metal or whatever you want to call it, extreme metal, and that was something that they'd achieved, and they had nothing more to explore in that realm, which is why I think That's the Spirit was such a big turning point for them. And this opening track really sets the tone for the rest of the album. It says, you've come here for this is how we're going to proceed. It certainly has this kind of electronic influence, and it's something that before has been an influence on their music, and now this is very much an electronic song. As an opening record, it's more of an interlude, but it reminds you of somewhere between, I don't know, Art of Noise and Aphex Twin. It's a real soft interlude's a good way of putting it, but for an intro, really sets the tone nicely for the rest of the record, and it's certainly something you wouldn't expect from a Bring Me the Horizon album. Mantra was the first record that we came across when they announced that they were back and making new music, and from the get-go I was a fan. It probably helped that I first heard it during their Secret set last year at Reading Festival, and as a second track, it kind of works as a nice countermeasure for track 1. Track 1 says, this isn't going to be an album that you're expecting from us. Track 2 says, but we've still got the riffs. And it just makes for this massive record. And it's a track that I featured on Music Club a couple of months ago, so it's a record that I know I already was a fan of. Nihilist Blues, track 3, recruiting some production and vocal help from the wonderful Grimes. This was perhaps the record that I was most excited to, the track, sorry, that I was most excited to check out on this record. And it's certainly a track that really pushes the envelope of what makes a rock record these days. The kind of dark pop, synth, electronic pop influence of Grimes works really well, and this kind of rock industrial sound is something that she's been exploring in her own music recently, so I feel like there's a nice crossroads for the two kind of acts working together. This record has this really kind of eerie, glitchy sound to it, and the subtle Grimes vocals towards the end are really quite creepy, and it reminds me a lot of like what Marilyn Manson used to do. It's scary to listen to. But Marilyn Manson making music in 2019, not if he was making music in 1999. This record is most definitely a standout track for me, and I can imagine it going down really, really well live. And the synth work really reminds me of how Hadouken used to use synths in their music to kind of just build hype, and it has like a ravey feel to it. I really like it. It's a track that I'm certainly enjoying more and more every time I listen to it. In the Dark works as a really nice follow-up to Nihilist Blues, this time taking a much more kind of pop approach. We'll go into some of the more commercial approaches in this record later on, but this is definitely one of the more poppier numbers, especially kind of contemporary current pop. It kind of has this mix between, the guitars remind me of Say Nada by Shaka, but also, I think clear influences from people like Halsey, that kind of using guitar samples in this kind of stonery way. It's not something that really resonates with me, and it's one of my lesser favourite tracks on this album. And the kind of plucked violin samples sound like they come straight out of a Panic at the Disco record. The chorus rocks it up quite a bit, which I think kind of helps. It reminds you that you are listening to a rock album, and it also features this really catchy kind of vocal hook saying "in the dark" on repeat. But it's probably, as a record, it's one of my least favourite on the album. Wonderful Life is without a doubt a huge standout for me on this record. Probably my highlight. It features some incredible vocal support for the always bizarre and never boring Danny Filth of Craigler Filth fame. A band that used to terrify me as a younger man, absolutely terrify me. And this is just a massive sounding record. I absolutely adore the production on it. I think it's really loud and aggressive and epic. Epic is the word I would use for this. But I think the vocal layering is by far the best on this. It layers this really simple kind of harmonic singing voice with a kind of classic Ollie scream, and it kind of conjures up this kind of bipolar sound between the two. One of them is trying to push through songs and melody, and the other one that's trying to harbour back to their old sound. And when Danny Filth's vocals come in kind of before I used to be a drum and bass producer, so I would call it the second drop, but it's definitely not. But it's definitely scary, and it works really well for this record. And I'm sure that once that second drop comes in, it's sure to break a few bones in live audiences. Ouch is one of the first kind of interlude tracks on the album, obviously bar the intro. And it's one that I find myself drawn to just to go and listen to. I really, really love this. I have this huge appreciation for hip hop and electronic music, and this for me sounds like you can tell that they understand song structure and what makes big, scary, loud noises, but they're taking influences from people like Kate Renata or Fortet. No, not Fortet. The drums in this are incredibly, they're like a really processed jazz beat, something that I think reminds me of Bus Ride by Kate Renata. And the warm synths really give this track some kind of room, something that I think they're probably were listening to people like R.L. Grime and Flume. That's just my opinion, don't know if that's true or not. And the lyrics kind of herald back to the previous album, specifically the track Follow You, one of my favourites, I have to say. Medicine is probably the biggest departure from their previous sound. It joins tracks like In the Dark and Mother Tongue as being some of the more commercially accessible records on this album. It has this real like poppy, You Me at Six, emo-y, whiny sound to it. It's something that when I first heard it I actually really liked, but the more I listen to it, the more I struggle to enjoy it. And I think that as a record, there's parts of it that remind me of like post-punk, kind of the dancier stuff. Certainly electronic influence of kind of post-punk music, but it's a bit more kind of processed and compressed than poppy. So I find myself drawing more kind of comparison to British emo and kind of pop punk. Although the record's sentiment about kind of ridding your life of poisonous and venomous people is something that I definitely resonate with. Track 8, Sugar, Honey, Ice and Tea, is surely one of those records they've designed to get the crowd going. And whilst the kind of screams of old Bring Me the Horizon aren't there, there's certainly this really catchy, what tempo is it? Must be like, what, 140? So it must be about 140. So it's got that kind of dubstep bounce to it that allows you to really bang your head. And so even though it doesn't have that kind of same scream, it definitely brings some of the chug of some of the more traditional sounds through. And ends up just being this kind of monster in the middle of the album. That being said, when you finally do get to the end of the record and you do get that scream, it really rounds it off really nicely. Yeah, the scream at the end is just really cool, isn't it? It really takes you from, it's almost like they're holding back. That's what I really like about this, that rather than trying to make something new because they don't think they can make other stuff, they have this sound that basically pushes them to, they're trying to make something different, and in the process they're having to hold themselves back. And then when that kind of push from their old sound comes too much, it overtakes it, and I think that just works really, really well. I'll go into more of this later, but Sugar, Honey, Ice and Tea, what a tune. Why You've Got to Kick Me When I'm Down is perhaps the most bizarre record on this album. You know, we go into like techno and we go into processed electronic jazz, real early electronica. You've got like the screams with Craigler Filth, you've got dark synth pop, and then when you get to track 9, Ollie is trying to be Jaden Smith. It's an approach that I definitely did not expect to hear, and as someone who's really not a fan of mumble rap and triplet flows and trap beats, I really am surprised that I like this song as much as I do, and I just can't get enough of it. I saw on my Facebook the other day when I saw one of my friends was commenting about this album and how he thought that this song should have been a side project, and then one of the comments underneath said just 2 words: Lil Psycho. I thought that's really cool. Calling he should be Ollie aka Lil Psycho. I do love the switch up in the later parts of the record when it kind of goes into the choruses, and as the song builds it goes less and less away from this kind of mumble rap sound, and it ends up reminding me way more of things like The Prodigy, which I think is something that just kind of, you know, goes hand in hand with Bring Me the Horizon's current sound, and something that I really think they could take advantage of live. This song would be huge live. They could extend that kind of latter part out and it would be brilliant. Although I'm not sure how I feel about the kind of little ravey bit after the song finishes. It's like a mid-album bonus track and it doesn't really do anything, so it's not anything that I'm that excited about, but you know, yeah. Regardless, that song is bizarre and I applaud them for it. Fresh Bruises is our second kind of interlude track. It's much more electronic than anything they've done before. It's kind of like two-step meets like a German techno sounding kind of record. It's a much darker tone. It has much more of a kind of quartet meets burial approach, especially with the vocals. They're very, very Archangel. It's quite avant-garde in its approach, which is a tone that I think works throughout the album. That's certainly something that I've come to think the album does. It's very avant-garde, specifically when comparing it to a previous album, but this track even more so. Mother Tongue is, in my opinion, the most commercial sounding record on the album, and certainly kind of achieves the goal of being the most catchy sounding record. You will listen to this song and have that hook stuck in your head for days. But similar to Medicine, the more I listened to it, the more I just fall out of love with it. The part towards the end of the record, following the second chorus with the whole whoa is something that I really don't like. I just find it kind of corny, and it kind of reminds me of the work of 30 Seconds to Mars, and I'm not sure if that's me being nice or not. Personally, I think like it doesn't flow well from the previous couple of tracks. In my last album review, when I was talking about Lost Under Heaven's second album, I was talking about how the tracks don't flow well from each other. This album flows wonderfully up until this point. I don't think it goes nicely in from Why You Gotta Kick Me When You're Down into Fresh Bruises, which is a lovely transition, but I don't think it transitions very well into Mother Tongue. But it's certainly a great kind of ballad for the band, and I think it does really well in that instance. Track 12, entitled Heavy Metal, is one of my standout tracks for this album, and similar to kind of Mantra and Wonderful Life, I can see this working really well live. Musically, it has this kind of siren throughout the kind of first half of it that really reminds me of Faint by Linkin Park. This track in particular has a real kind of nu metal sound to it, kind of evolving on from what was started all those years ago. You know, Linkin Park had this real kind of electronic influence. I think Jordan's probably the Joey Hahn of Bring Me the Horizon, and I think that works. I think that's really helped them in their kind of change into becoming a new band. But this song, absolutely, I draw comparisons to Faint, without a doubt. On this track, they recruit the help from the legend that is Rahzel, an incredible beatboxer that went viral before going viral was even a term coined, with his performance of Iron Man. And another fun fact, he's the voice of SSX Tricky. I was watching an interview with Ollie and Jordan about this track the other day, and they were talking how it started off as a joke record. It's about kind of having a laugh about how they've changed as a band. They talked about how when they were really heavy, they weren't allowed to be in that scene, but now that they're going more commercial, they're not allowed to be poppy, and you know, I get that. That's hilarious. So this song is one that is kind of written in jest of the haters, if you will, or the people that comment on forums. But for me, it's the last 10 seconds of this track that really steal the show. It's got this really catchy lyric that says, "'Cause some kid on the gram said he used to be a fan, but this shit ain't heavy metal." Just as the track breaks into this incredibly dark black metal record. Something again that I think they could really, really work on live and just extend out longer. That would just make crowds go absolutely incredible. As I mentioned earlier, this one really feels like they've got the aggression there, but they're fighting really hard to not let it out. But when it does come out, oh, it's good. As a record, it's very, very tasteful and quite amusing, and definitely a huge highlight for me. especially those last 10 seconds. The last record on this album, track 13, entitled I Don't Know What to Say, has this wonderful orchestral approach, something that I know both Bring Me and Biffy Clyro have been working on in the last few years. Combining string section with distorted guitars is something that I think works really well for both acts, especially with the kind of experimentation and production style that they've put into this record. As a track itself, it's about dealing with loss and how when something really bad happens, you just don't have anything to say. And I think the kind of epic emotions of the strings really aid this. My only kind of criticism is that aesthetically, I think it may have worked better as the penultimate track. Or do I? I don't know. The problem is I would have really loved for them to have finished on heavy metal with that scream right at the end. That would have been just so good. But I'm still making my mind up. I do really like the way that the strings fade the record out as well. That does also end on a high, which I think is really nice. All in all, I'm not sure if this record is utter garbage or pure genius. And because of that, I'm leaning towards the latter. I think if you listen to an album and it's exactly what you expect it to be, then you're probably going to be disappointed. But if something really shocks you, like it really goes out its way to shock you, then that's wonderful. I think what Bring Me the Horizon have done here have made a record that they wanted to make. They wanted to really push barriers. And they said what they wanted to do was be the heaviest band in a pop scene rather than the poppiest band in a heavy scene. And I think they've really achieved that. They've hit the nail on the head. Regardless of if you're a fan of their music or not, you can't deny that. But as someone who's never really gone out of my way to listen to them, I cannot stop listening to this album. There are probably 3 songs that I'm not really a big fan of. I think that it works with their sound, and I think that as a Bring Me the Horizon fan, it's probably going to be something that you would really enjoy. But for me, I loved the experimentation on this album. I've never really come across someone that's willing to kind of break so far away from guitars when their inception as a band was like extreme black metal and deathcore. Like it's mental. They've done a really good job. I think as a whole, this is an incredible body of work, something that should definitely be commended for. And I think to change your sound as a band just as much as they have without having to isolate their fans is an incredible achievement. I was talking in one of my Music Club episodes a couple of weeks ago about rock bands trying to make music for the club and how I've never really come across anything like that before. But this really starts to push that envelope out. And it's not an album that's going to be for everyone. If you like really extreme like metalcore Bring Me the Horizon, you're probably going to be really disappointed with this. But that's why their old albums are still available. You can go back and listen to them. But I think as a fan of music and new music, I think it's a really cool album. It's a cool album. It's really different, and I'm really impressed. And so I think I would give this album an 8 out of 10, maybe even a 9, because it's so courageous, and I think that's really commendable. And I think I might have to go see them live to decide if I think that they're worthy of that. Have you listened to this album? What do you think? Are you an old fan of Bring Me the Horizon? Are you a new fan of Bring Me the Horizon? Are you an old fan that likes their new sound? Let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to know your thoughts. I think I really like it. I think I really do. Regardless, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers. Bye.